guys, welcome to Fat Quarter Shop Friday live stream. It's February 24th, 2023. Now this is pre-recorded since I had another commitment today, but we're going to be in chat answering all your questions, and we're going to run this just like we normally would. So today we're working on block 17, and I want to talk a little bit about the block. This is called Simplicity. It's one of my favorite blocks from Sewcialites, and this is the day that we're going to moving into making 3-inch blocks for the first time. So let's talk a little bit about the block. This block uses Dwell by Camille Ross Kelly. This is Cinnamon and Cream by Fig Tree, and this is Nutmeg by Basic Gray. So this block is very easy. It's just 3 squares on the outside and 3 hourglass blocks. So let's talk a little bit about color. It's probably easiest to see on this one, but this block has dark on the outside, light on the inside, and the rotation of the blocks here is the same and this is different. And so you'll notice this one has one background in the inside, so does this one, and so does this one, with lights on the outside. Now you could do darks, you can do whatever you like, but I'm going to show you some different options. This one is the Emma collection by Sherry and Chelsea, and this one's the same. It's got everything rotated. And we're going to learn a little bit about hourglass blocks today. And this one is Minnick and Simpson. This is Sweetwater. So these are all sewn exactly the same way, where the background is in the same spot. I'm going to show you 2 that are a little bit different to give you some options if you want to do yours differently. So this one right here is the Flower Farm by Bunny Hill, and this sample maker, what she did is she used 2 of the same fabric, so here and here the same, this one different, and then she used the same here and here. So this one is more like bolder, pinker, and it's more of a blended block just because repeating the same fabric. So that's an option. And then another option is on this designer, she did the same thing with the same dark on the outsides, but then here, instead of putting the light as just a background, she used the same print, and so it kind of blends in. So there's some different color options you can do. So you can see medium, light, medium, dark, medium, light, darker colors. So you can have fun playing around with this. Now, one thing, you can always rotate these differently. This block, again, is called Simplicity by Vanessa Goertzen, and she says about her block, she's a sucker for simplicity in general, but has come to realize that she appreciates it during a sew-along when life gets busy. And that is so true, that when you are doing a sew-along, it's great to have hard blocks and it's great to have easy blocks. So I'm going to show you her current fabric collection. Her current fabric collection is called Country Rose, and I've made a couple things out of it. I love it. It's got the dusty blues, peaches, greens, of course the pinks that I love. She is not only a motif fabric designer, but she also designs her own patterns, and they're really popular. She's one of our top selling pattern designers. And this is Gingham Style, which is going to be, this used the previous collection to this. This is Lovey Dovey, and this is Gather. Now this one I would love to try. It's curved piecing, and I haven't tried that before. And a few years ago, we published a book with her called Rose and Bloom, and I'm excited to make this again. I'm going to recolor this and make this in something else. So that's a little bit about the designer. We're going to jump right into the block. And so I already pulled this out of my binder, block 17. So you can download the free block at Fat Quarter Shop. And we're moving to the 3-inch block. So I made all of my blocks 1 through 8 at 9 inches, blocks 9 through 16 at 6 inches, and I'm making blocks 17 through 24 at 3 inches. So we're going to talk a lot about working with small fabrics and accuracy. So let's first talk about hourglass blocks and hourglass math. When you look, your unfinished size for your 3-inch is 1.5. So because that's unfinished 1.5, that means it finishes at 1 inches. This one finishes at 2 inches, and this one finishes at 3 inches. Now, if you want to sew the block and have it exactly come out that size, you take the finished size plus 1.25. So always remember hourglass 1.25. So if you take finished size 1 plus 1.25, that's going to give you an exact hourglass. But what we like to do is add a 1/4 inch extra. So we add 1.5, which gives you 2.5. So anytime you're doing hourglass, just look at how the designer writes it, and if they haven't fudged by giving you a little bit more, I would add a 1/4 inch more. So we're going to do that with our fabric A, B, E, and F. Now I'm going to give you some tips on cutting these squares. So A, and we're going to be doing the middle row. No, the left row. Okay, so when you're cutting a square like this for hourglass, you're going to cut it twice. You're going to cut it one way and then the other way. And it's important that you don't cut wrong. So if you look at this, if you cut this, this is going to be fatter than this. So one tip I have is you can always put your ruler on the tip, put your finger on it, and then slide the ruler on the top. And then I try to always do it with a rotating mat. Turn, put my finger right on that tip, and then rotate. And that's how you cut your squares. So we're going to start by making both 1 hourglass for right here. We're going to make this hourglass, and you're going to repeat to do the same thing on the middle and the outside. So let's start with our fabrics. So you're going to put your fabrics just like they would be. You're going to save these leftover A's for the other blocks, and then the other two you won't need the 2 blue pieces. So what I always do is on a design board put my fabrics the way that they should be, and we're right here or right here, either one. And what I do here is put them right sides together. And we're going to zoom in, and I'm going to talk about why pins are so important when you're working with small blocks. So this is a 3-inch block. The smaller the block, the more accurate you have to be. So everything is personal preference. But I like to use these little house pins. Let's see. So they are shorter than some pins. Some pins, this is way too long for me. I want it to be a little bit shorter, and I want the diameter of it to be very thin. So I'm going to show you 2 different things. With the pin that I like, I'm going to pin twice. And anytime you're working with 3-inch, you kind of have to pin. You can't really get away with not pinning. So that the fabric just lays nice and flat. Now I got a thicker pin, so it's real thick, and if you put it in there and pull it, sometimes, now it looks okay here, Sometimes if your pin is too thick, it's going to pull your fabric. It actually looks like it's working pretty good there. So what I'm going to do is go to the sewing machine and sew a 1/4 inch, keep a chain going, and sew a 1/4 inch. And my biggest tip for 3 inches, pin and use thin pins and not thick pins. So I'm using a 1/4 inch seam. And just remove the pins as you get to them. I'm going to keep these with the chain in the center. I'm going to set the seam, press to one side, the pieces are so tiny they don't want to, there we go. And then I'm going to press that open. And I am using steam. So from here, we just need to sew this seam, but I am going to cut this because I'm going to be pressing open, and if you don't cut that, it's going to get stuck. So what I like to do here is start in the center and pin. Now if I took that thicker pin, which I just had, I think I've lost it now. It's not going to be, there it is right there. I can tell it's too thick. It's going to go in easier the thinner you pin, the thinner your pin. So this is going in the trash. So I'm going to make sure that that is lined up. And I like to pin just straight. Some people pin diagonally, and you can do whatever works for you. Now, because this is a 3-inch block, I am pinning. Now, on a bigger block, maybe I wouldn't pin here and here, but I'm just going to sew with a 1/4 inch seam. Make sure my seams line up. Now I want this nice and flat. So we talked about how we came to the math to make it bigger so that we can trim down. So we wrote it so you trim down. On the 3-inch, we're going to trim to 1.5. So I don't have a 1.5-inch ruler. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make one. And I'm going to show you some tips. This is just painter's tape or washi tape. Okay, so when you're trimming, you can see it here better. We want to trim it to 1.5 by 1.5. And because I don't have a 2.5-inch ruler, I'm going to put the tape on there so I can see, because when you line it up, you need to line up all 4 corners. So you got to line up this, 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 and this. And you got to line up the center. So 1.5 divided by 2 is 3/4. So this right here should be at your 3/4 inch mark, which is right here. Okay, so when you're lining it up, start with your 3/4 inch, which is your center, and then you're lining up here, 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 and here. And I can see right here I'm a little bit off. But it's so important to get this right. So now I'm going to cut 2 sides first. And now that's all the waste you have, so it's not too much. Then I'm going to rotate and do the other side. And when you have cut your hourglass, you should have this be right in the center of that seam. So that's my biggest point to you. And then we're going to line up and make the row. And so when you're looking at the block, the layout is white at the top, white on the side, white at the top. So it's just the direction. So I've already sewn these together and pressed open. What I'm going to do now is give you some tips on working with 3-inch. So the first thing I'm going to do is put this right sides together. And it cannot be it does not give, for having a 3-inch block, there's no room for being off in a seam. So we're going to pin this, sew with the seam, press, add the other one, and then we'll start putting the units together. Set the seam, press to one side, and again we're working on block 17. It's called Simplicity by Vanessa Goertzen of Lella Boutique. We're going to add that other square on the bottom, pin, okay, so we're going to go back to the cutting table. And when you're looking at all 3 of these, this should be exactly a 1/4 inch right there from the edge to the white. Exactly a 1/4 inch. Exactly a 1/4 inch and exactly a 1/4 inch. Because if it's not, these seams right here are not going to line up. But I'm going to give you some tips on how you can make it work. So the first thing I'm doing is I'm going to put the blue and the white together. So I'm going to put them right sides together. And I'm going to just pin at the beginning and the end first, just to have a base. Okay. Now here, I'm going to do poke a pin. Okay, and you see how that seam is coming apart? The stitch length is not long enough. So I need to go fix that real quick. So I just added a little bit more to it, but you need to put your pin in the white, right at that intersection, and then the pin right in this intersection. So in those points, have it flat, remove the pin and put it back in. Do the same thing on the second one. And then we're going to sew with a 1/4 inch seam. Now when you get to right here, you can look at where the seam is to try to hit that intersection if you want. And then you're going to look to see if it meets up, and it does. And just set your seam. Now, I would recommend anytime you're working with a 3-inch block, always press open. It will not work without pressing open. And my stitch length, I would use 1.2, 1.3. And then we're going to add the next one. So just right sides together and do that same method. And I just poke the pin. Now you could also eyeball it, but on something this small, poke a pin will be more accurate. And you want that pin to go straight up and pin. And we did, when we looked at all of the blocks submitted by the designers, we put the easier blocks at the end because we knew those were going to be our 3 inches. Okay, we're going to sew down that seam. And you might have noticed when I was at the sewing machine, my fingers were really in there, kind of holding things together. And you kind of have to do that with 3-inch blocks so that things don't move. You have to kind of use your fingers a little bit more. So from here, I'm going to just trim around the outside. The reason I do that is I don't want these little threads, but also when you trim, you want to be careful on the sides, and I'll show you. So you just trim this. Now here, you need your 1/4 inch to be exactly a 1/4 inch. So when you're trimming, you can't just trim. You have to make sure your 1/4 inch line hits there. And so it does, and barely any came off. Because sometimes I think when people chop blocks, they forget about their seams. So this is the block in 3-inch and 6-inch. And again, this is the Dwell collection. And this is block 17 by Lella Boutique. We're going to take a quick break, and we're going to come back and talk all about my whips for this week. So thanks so much for sticking with us. Now we're going to move into all of the sew-alongs that I'm doing. And this week we are showing block 2 from the Barn Star Sampler book. And I wanted to show you, I changed my block a little bit. Now when you look at the block, it's exactly the same. I changed the piecing method. So I'm going to show you that. So the first thing I did, I'm going to kind of use these rulers to show you the change I made. And I made this change going forward in future blocks. So block 3, I also did this. So Shelly wrote the pattern for this to be a rectangle with a corner square. And I just didn't want to do corner squares because to me, corner squares are never as accurate and they're harder to line up a corner square to a half square. So a half square to a half square always does great. So I adjusted this, and for all of these that are out here, there's 8 per block. I did 1 3.5 inch square and 1 3-inch finished half square triangle paper, and this is the paper that I use, so just 3 inches. So that's the change that I made. And then to get my block accurate, like I said, I used triangle paper on all of these, and then here I used 3 by 6 inch flying geese paper. You could also use the small flying geese ruler by Eleanor Burns. So that's how I was able to get everything accurate. And I'm going to show you both blocks so you can see the colorway that we picked. And we just have stronger colors forming the X on both, and like little arrows on the tips. Now, you can definitely do this either way, and you can comment and let me know which way you think works best. But I love the design. I didn't change any of Shelly's designs. I just changed the piecing method. And you should always feel like comfortable to do that. Another thing you could do here is, instead of flying geese, these could be half square triangles. So whatever your method is that works best for you is what you should do. I just wanted this point to be as accurate as possible and did not think that with corner squares I could do it as accurately. Now this quilt, I'm doing mostly pressed open until I get to putting the rows together, and then I press to one side. Just because this is very scrappy. And because it's scrappy, I wanted it to lay flatter, so I'll fix that later. So that is Barn Star Sampler 2. And then in March, I will be showing you block 3s. And this one was much easier than block 1. Block 1 was larger, more seams, and smaller pieces. So this one was much easier. I think I got both of these done in about 6 hours. So that's Barn Star. Next, I'm going to show you my Riley Blake block from the week. So Riley Blake has a block challenge for 2023. And this is the Honey Blossom block by Lori Holt. And when I pieced this, well, I'm using the Calico collection, and I'm going to turn mine into a table runner. And I pieced everything with my seams open. And to get it accurate, I used half square triangle paper here. So this is H200, so I used triangle paper here. I used square and a square paper for the corners. And for this, you can either cut this in rectangles, or you could do one big strip set and chop it down. And that's what I did. So, and I also just, made sure to pin in each of the intersections. And thank you to Lori Holt for coloring this for me. This one, I'm going to be showing you blocks every week. It's a free download at Riley Blake Designs Fabrics. The next sew along for this week is Scrappiness is Happiness, and this is Lori's newest book. And I'm also using the, is this Calico or Prairie? Prairie. This one I'm using the Prairie collection. They look pretty similar. They would Calico and Prairie, they would mix and match. So this block, really easy. All the fabric requirements are on the Jolly Jabber blog. The finishing pattern is free. The block patterns are in the book. So this is the Blossom block, and it was very easy to make because this is a very, as it says, scrappiness. It's a very scrappy quilt. So when you're pulling and making lots of scrappy blocks, sometimes you have to pull 10 colors. This one was easy since I only had to have one background, one flower color, and one inside color. And on here, I'm doing a mix of pressing open and pressing to one side. And when you press open, you can always tell if your seams match by looking to see if they touch. So that is Scrappiness is Happiness, and we will be doing this all the way through June. And then Jolly Bar 4 is our brand new Jolly Bar book. We have 4 of these, and we are doing a quilt along. And we're kind of in the middle of the quilt along, so I'm going to show you the blocks for this week. You need the book. It's a very low priced book, which is great. And here are my blocks. This is the little paperwork you would download for free from Fat Quarter Shop. All you would need is the book. And so this is the Illumination block and the Zinnia block. And this one's kind of similar to the Blossom block that you just saw. So, you know, similar, but different. This one has rectangles, bigger. So, you know, sometimes blocks end up looking similar. Now this one, I'm using a Bella Solid as an accent fabric with the Simply Delightful fabric by Sherry and Chelsea. And again, combination of open and not open. Now I'm going to show you some sample maker blocks. So like I said, this is Simply Delightful by Sherry and Chelsea. And this fabric is Bleu de France by French General. This is Sun Wash by Corey Yoder. And these two collections right here, Sun Washed and Simply Delightful, are what I'm using for Barnstar Sampler because I'm mixing and matching them. And then this is Filigree by Zen Chic. So one thing I wanted to point out in this block is right here, you are not creating a 1/4 inch seam away from the block. So usually, you know, you have a 1/4 inch seam. This one, when you add that next fabric, it's going to have a choppy chop to it, and that's going to be really cute. So it may look like it's a mistake, but it's not. So this one, my tip would be to use a friction pin, to use, I'm going to actually show you my half square triangle bucket because I was able to get some from this. So when I put my corner squares on here, I have leftovers. They're somewhere in here. Let's see if I can find it. But somewhere in here is half square triangles made out of this. I don't know exactly where it is right now, but my tip is to use pins, save the extras that you chop off to be half square triangles, save those into half square triangle bucket. These would be too small to save. And okay, let me turn this one just so you can see color. So you've got like modern, not modern, you've got a darker background, a lighter background, darker, you know, lots of, I think one key thing is just to make sure that the center shows here. And I like how the accent fabric here is dark enough to contrast with the rest of the block. So thank you to everyone who is sewing along with us. And thank you to my sample makers for making these blocks. And then I wanted to let you know that next week will also be another premiere for Sewcialites 18 because I'm actually going to be out of town next week. But today we're going to give away three people will win a gingham style quilt kit. Now, so to enter, I'm going to tell you how to do that. But also, if you just want the pattern is on flash sale today. But if you want to enter to the kit, all you have to do is enter and let me know, out of all the Sewcialites we've done so far, which block is your favorite, and Ashley will announce the winner on Monday. I hope all of you have a great weekend, and I'll see you next week.